Well, thanks for having me tonight, guys. I'm really excited to be here because I'm originally from Texas, born and raised. It's my mom in the pink shirt. And so I love to come back home, even though home was Fort Worth, Texas. I always joke with my Louisiana friends that the grass is greener and the air is fresher over here, to the point that some of the professors, anytime they come to Texas, they text me as soon as they cross the border, and they say, oh, and I say, breathe deep, and it's a fun joke for us. So any excuse I can get to come back is perfectly fine for me. How many of you guys grow vegetables in your garden now, or on your patio, or, so a lot of people. Anybody just no? Not at all. How many of you guys who raised your hands and said, yes, I grow vegetables, have you had your vegetables die because of disease or some other factor? Nobody wants to admit it, but yeah, a lot of times, right? Okay, how many of y'all in here like to spray tons and tons of chemicals in your yard? I like to spray a little bit because it makes me feel better, like I'm doing something, but not tons and tons and tons, right? So when we're talking about different ways to manage disease or better grow our plants and that kind of thing, we're always looking for new techniques or looking back, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago at old techniques people might have used to help keep their plants healthy. So tonight we're going to talk about tomato grafting. Anybody in here grafted a tomato before? A couple of people. Okay. And it's not something that usually the home gardener thinks of, but we see it, on these plants. Has anybody in here bought a grafted tomato? Yes. How much did you spend for that? Not much. They range anywhere from 50 cents a plant if you're buying a lot of them, all the way up to $19.99 if you go through Burpees, and you get your jumbo tomato. So let's talk about how we don't have to spend $20 a plant and do it ourselves if it's appropriate for you in your garden. So grafting is not new, okay? Ever since, the 5th century, people were grafting. They were taking their prized melons and they were putting them on these big, hunky gourds that didn't taste good. They were good for nothing, but their rootstock or their roots were really vigorous, right? They could withstand droughts and floods and all kinds of things, and it just helped that plant that tasted good grow a little bit better, okay? And throughout the years, from thousands of years ago through the 1920s, 30s, and even the 90s, when it really became very, very popular, places like China and Korea, Spain, Italy, Turkey, these countries, most of their plants are grafted plants when it comes to tomatoes or especially cucurbits. And it's because they keep having to grow in the same field over and over and over. And for everybody who raised their hand and said they were a gardener, what's the problem when you never rotate your crops? When you keep that same tomato crop or that same okra or whatever you like, squash, in the field over and over, what happens? Nematodes. You get depleted soils from certain nutrients. What else? Nematodes and diseases. So, all these different microscopic organisms, they really get you. And that's not good. And that's the reason really why we graft, okay? So if you are a backyard gardener, you're growing these vegetables because either A, you think it tastes better, right? Because you get to pick it fully ripe and it's delicious, and it is. It's really good. Or you want to know how it was produced. You don't want a lot of residue on your plants. You want to know it was grown maybe sustainably or organically or that kind of thing. But how do you raise plants? When we live in the South with humidity, with tons of rain, and then no rain, and then tons of rain and no rain, without using some of those tools, we have to look at some different approaches. So bacterial wilt is one of the diseases that I want to bring up. Is this picture right here. My friend Craig Roussel took that picture in his neighbor's house. Is when there's bacteria in the soil, okay, and it gets into your tomato plant, and it basically clogs up the xylem and the phloem, all those tubes in the sides of the plant that bring up the water and back down the sugars, right? And so you go out and your tomatoes are growing good and they look fine, and then all of a sudden they're just wilted the next morning, and you go and you water it, or you look at the soil and it's nice and wet, and you're thinking what's going on, and no matter how much water you put on them, they stay like that. Well, the bacteria clogs the plant like a clogged pipe. So it doesn't matter what you put to the soil, they're going to just wilt, and then they're going to die, okay? And if you get that bacteria, those teeny tiny little organisms, Their populations multiply so fast and so quickly, and there are no fumigants or no chemicals or no anything that you can put to get rid of them. The only way to kill them is to starve them, okay? And the only way you can starve them is by taking away their food source. And so you have to take away tomatoes. You have to take away tomatoes and usually potatoes and eggplant and peppers. Why? They're all in the same family. And if you like ice cream, you probably like pie. You know, it's all related kind of, right? It all goes together. If you like desserts, they're all related. Okay, they're all related. So if you keep that food there, those microorganisms are always going to be there. They're never going to go away. How long do you have to keep it out of your garden before you can safely plant one of those back in that spot? Does anybody know? 5 years. This one, bacterial wilt, Ralstonia, 5 years. Now, it's okay for you or me because we just go get a pot of soil, right? We go get a new bag of soil. We grow our tomato in a pot. No big deal. We had one lady in Baton Rouge that got this in her soil, okay, Ralstonia. It was confirmed through the lab. We knew she had it. She said, that's fine. I'm going to go buy some wood and I'm going to make raised beds and I'm going to buy new soil. She bought all these fancy, brick beds and everything. She put in some visqueen to keep out the bad stuff. She, tore little holes in it. Imported all this soil into her backyard. I don't know how much money she spent, all right? Planted her tomatoes. The next season, she got it again. What did she do wrong? Does anybody know? She didn't clean her tools. She went and dug around her roses and played, with her trowel here and there, and then went into the beds again and got it again. So it's really, really devastating. Okay, so it's devastating for her. But it's devastating if you're a commercial producer. You can't go 5 years without having tomatoes. Nobody at the farmer's market is going to come buy everything else and then go hit somebody else up for the tomatoes. They want to go to the stand where they have everything, especially the tomatoes. Tomatoes are like king of vegetable gardens, all right? That's what people like to eat. So that's devastating. Now, we have another disease, fusarium wilt, okay? Fusarium wilt kind of looks the same way. Your plants go down, they come back up, they go down. But the telltale difference is that one half of the plant always dies and the other doesn't. So that's how you know if you have fusarium wilt. Bacterial wilt, going back to that, if you don't want to spend the money to send your plant sample into the lab, you can cut any of those branches, okay, and you can put it into a clear glass of warm water and wait about 5 minutes. And if you see white stuff streaming out of the plant, that's how you know you have that disease. It's the bacteria coming out of the plant. All right, southern blight. Any of y'all who've grown tomatoes, have you ever had around the base of the stem that white cottony look to it? Same symptoms. Your plant, goes down and starts wilting, pops back up, goes down, looks like it's wilting, pops back up. This one takes a little longer than Ralstonia usually. If you dig around the base of your tomato stem and you see all this white cottony stuff, do y'all see what I'm talking about right up there? The top picture? And then you can kind of see those little mustard yellow seeds. If you see that, you have southern blight. Much better, okay? Much better to have. You don't have to wait the whole 5 years and all that kind of stuff to get back in with that. Some people will wrap tinfoil around the base of their plant and plant that. They do all kinds of funny things. In the commercial world, we can put out PCMB and Terrachlor and drench our plants at the beginning. Those are not options for the home gardener though, okay? So how do we get out of having this, this fungus in the soil that we need to get above it? We graft. Nematodes. Who in here has had nematode problems? Right? Nematodes are annoying, okay? And this is what they do. They feed on your roots and they knot up all the roots. And then, of course, nutrients and water and that kind of thing don't go into the plant properly and you don't have good yields and over time you have plant death. So what can we do? We can graft, okay? Other reasons why people graft. Have you guys ever heard of high tunnels? Anybody in here growing high tunnels or using that kind of thing? That's down here. This is Mr. Robert Poole, one of my favorite farmers ever, but he passed away recently. But this is his high tunnel. This is his tomato crop in there. When people invest in high tunnels, it's like investing in a greenhouse. They don't like to rotate their crops. They're trying to go almost year-round with it, get their tomatoes in the off season. They want to have that high-priced tomato when no one else has them. So we have to start grafting in those situations because we're not rotating crops. The other thing is now you have a rain shelter. So when you put all those fertilizers out over and over and over and over again, you build up the salts in your soil, okay? Just like in home gardens. That's why you're supposed to soil test, all right? So that's a problem. So we have certain rootstocks that are good for salinity, not ocean water, okay? But high salts in your soils. We have certain rootstocks that are so vigorous they don't need as much fertilizer, so you can get away with using less inputs. We have some that are drought tolerant, flood tolerant. You see the watermelon underwater right there? A grafted plant won't survive that. I just like being dramatic sometimes, okay? But you can have wet feet for a few days and survive that. That's gone, okay? There's nothing that can help that out. And sometimes you can even get higher yields. We had grad students looking at grafted tomato plants at LSU. They were grafting Cherokee Purple. Who in here is a tomato lover? Cherokee Purple is a what? Heirloom, right? It doesn't yield as much generally, that kind of thing, but it tastes really good. It's a purple tomato. They grafted Cherokee Purple. They planted Cherokee Purple in the field. Just, planted the seed, put the tomato in the field. They took Cherokee Purple, spliced them, and grafted it right back onto it. The same tomato, not this tomato onto that tomato, just, grafted it onto itself. Then they grafted Cherokee Purple onto some specific rootstocks that they were looking at to see if they could increase yield. And what do you think yielded more? The Cherokee Purple plants, and this is a replicated trial. They've got multiple plants, multiple plots, all the good stuff out there. What do you think yielded more? The regular Cherokee Purples or the Cherokee Purples that were cut literally in half and put back together and put in the field? The grafted. The Cherokee on Cherokee, statistically even, not just, visually or, a few more fruits, statistically yielded more. What's going on? I don't know. Sometimes stress does funny things to people. Stress to plants makes them bloom sometimes, but it wasn't stress by the time it was blooming. This happens way before that. Drawbacks of grafting, though. It sounds like it's a miracle thing, right? Well, okay, you have all these diseases, or you have high salts, or you don't want to fertilize as much, just graft your plants, no big deal. There's drawbacks to everything, okay? Higher greenhouse mortality. Usually you have about 20% loss in a greenhouse when you're growing a ton of plants, okay? Well, now to get one plant in the field, how many seeds do you have to plant if you're going to graft it? At least two, one for the top and one for the bottom, right? So now we could be up to potentially 40% loss. Labor requirements, okay? So why are we paying that $20, $3, 50 cents, that kind of thing a plant? Because now not only are you paying for someone to seed the crop and take care of it, but you're paying for someone to cut it in half, put it back together, heal it, and then keep it growing beyond that. Cost in the fields, all right? Commercially, when we're growing tomatoes, we'll plant a whole row of tomatoes. Say it's a 300-foot row, okay? You put a T-post every 20 plants, and between every 2 or 3 plants, we put a rebar. We don't stake every single tomato plant. That's too expensive, and it's too time-consuming to sit there and tie it up like this. We do what we call the Florida weave method. So you basically wrap twine around all your stakes, never touching the plants, and come back. So you have 2 rows of line coming up in a plant that just hangs over, okay? I need a picture to explain it to you guys maybe better, but it's not a stake per plant. But when you graft plants, what happens? Think about the tomatoes in your home garden. Do they grow perfectly straight and tall like an okra plant? What do? They kind of lean over. What's at the base of tomato plants that comes out all over? Suckers, yeah, so you got a sucker big time from the bottom of the tomato plant, but what else? What it has? Aerial what? Aerial roots, right? So when that weight of that fruit goes down and those aerial roots come out and now your grafted plant starts bending down, you could have the top part touching the ground again. So we have to use a stake per plant and keep them upright. This right here is from my grad student, Alejandra. We did a nice grafting project with her. This is eggplant on bottom, tomato on top. Okay, really cool, huh? So, but obviously the eggplant isn't growing at the same rate as the tomato. Tomatoes grow a lot faster than eggplants. So sometimes you even have to stake it, in the plant itself. Or in the field, put another little small stake at the base to kind of hold it up because of wind, right? Usually, 2 weeks after you've grafted, and if it's healed successfully, it's as strong of a plant as a non-grafted plant. But with a big, strong wind and too top-heavy of a plant, it'll knock over pretty good. And then sometimes the rootstock can actually influence the top of the plant. if it doesn't grow quick enough, it won't pull up enough nutrients, right? So the top doesn't produce as well as you like. Or if it pulls up nutrients too fast or water too fast, it could influence the flavor of the tomatoes. So there's all kinds of things to think about when you're thinking about grafting. And I know y'all can't see this, and there won't be a test, and we're not going to make you memorize anything, so don't worry. But if this is something you think, oh, this might be fun to play around with, or I think this would be cool, just remember vegetablegrafting.org, okay? There was a big multi-state specialty crop grant that a bunch of universities got, and what they did was they tested out all these different rootstocks. These rootstocks are coming out of Asia and, of course, Spain, Italy, that kind of place, because this is where they're doing most of the work, all right? And they're saying, okay, they're resistant to bacterial wilt right here. And it'll tell you, if you know you have a certain problem in your yard, it doesn't mean you can just graft onto anything else and it'll work, right? You have to find which rootstock is resistant or tolerant or, susceptible to the problem you have. So we don't just buy a grafted plant to have a grafted plant. You're wasting your money if you're doing that. You have to know your problem, and then you have to pick the rootstock that resolves that problem, okay? So there's lists like this, and that's an excellent, vegetablegrafting.org. It's very university-based, multiple trials, on people's farms, at universities. Great resource for you there. Usually what people are using is Maxifort. That's a good common one that's resistant to a whole bunch of things, but they list all kinds of seed or rootstock there. Going back to Alejandra, our grad student, I like to bring this up. I'm not going to give you the nuts and bolts of her work. It was really interesting, but that could take another 2 hours to talk to you about that, and y'all don't want to hear about all that. But what's really interesting is, who in here has had the flu? That's not interesting, but we've had it, okay? What do they say when you go to get a vaccination? Do they guarantee that that vaccination is going to work for the flu? No. Why not? Too many strains, okay? Same thing. We're having bacterial wilt in Louisiana. We have commercial farmers. They're calling us. They got bacterial wilt, okay? But sometimes the rootstocks won't work, or somebody might try to sell them a chemical and it's not working. Well, the problem is, out of 15 different samples she took, she found one race, 2 phylotypes, and 2 biovars, okay? So it's the same thing as the flu in layman's terms. There's the disease, and then multiple variations of this disease, right? It doesn't always react to things in the same way. So when we started looking at different rootstocks at LSU, and we looked at 31 different rootstocks called Cortep, 11 tomato rootstocks, 10 eggplant, 10 pepper. So it's TEP, tomato, eggplant, pepper rootstocks. We found that out of all 31, with our 6 different types of bacterial wilt we had in Louisiana, the only one out of 31 that we could not only successfully graft tomatoes to, but that was resistant to all our types was one, the eggplant, MM152. Isn't that crazy? So you really almost have to dig deep to make sure you're getting the right, what you're doing. And these are all her strains, and she did DNA work and all kinds of really cool stuff that even I didn't understand. I just nodded my head at the, okay, yeah, you got it, But anyhow, so let's get to the fun part, right? How do you graft, or what tools do you need? Razor blades, simple things, just a plain razor blade. You don't even have to put it in anything fancy. Seed companies will try to sell you grafting scissors, and you can buy those, and they do make a perfect cut, but you just slice through a tomato. It's pretty easy. If you can make a 45-degree angle, you're good. You need water in a mist bottle, alcohol, so you can, clean your razor blades between cuts so that you're not contaminating things. A lot of people say gloves. I don't like gloves because it's hot, humid in Louisiana. You're sitting in a greenhouse. I get all wet and sweaty, and I just don't think it's really helping out, because I'm wiping myself more than usual with those things on. But a lot of people wear gloves. And a humidity chamber, and I brought you guys a real simple version right here of one, but I'll show y'all some examples of that. So it's pretty simple tools, and I'm going to tell y'all where you can find these items. And while we're standing here talking about this, I'm going to start this clip on this side. There's all kinds of different clips, but usually you get clips for tomatoes between 1 and 2 millimeters wide. So you can take one out and look at it. You just pinch them and slip them on. So there's 2 different clips up there. Whoops. Ah, where am I going? Oh gosh, what happened?
Go the other one.
Left side, that's what's wrong. Giving y'all my secrets away. Okay. Okay, left and right. There we go. Not only do you need to have your tools, you need to know your correct terminology, okay? Top part, it's the part that has the good fruit you want. The Cherokee purples, your favorite heirloom, whatever tomato you really like, but happens to be susceptible to the disease you have, okay? Or your salt problems or whatnot. The top part we call the scion wood. The bottom part we call the rootstock. The graft line or the graft union is just the part where they come together, and then soil level, okay? Soil level is important. Why? Somebody says when you have your grafted plant, make sure you don't plant it deeper than soil level. Why would that be a problem? Right, because if this scion wood, y'all see the graft line right there, right? If the scion wood is the susceptible part, but you give somebody a whole bunch of grafted tomato plants, and how do people usually like to plant their tomato plants? Deep. Dig a hole to China and put that sucker in and go for it. If you plant with the scion wood touching the soil or below the soil level, it's just back to square one. You just did all that for nothing, right? So you got to know about the soil level or the soil line. All right. The Japanese tube method is the most popular method out there. And if you're touching the clips in the plastic bag, that's the one with the tube. Basically, you cut your rootstock at a 45-degree angle, you cut your scion wood at a 45-degree angle, and you make them match. So what we do is, this is the rootstock. We're going to slice it. Y'all see right there? Stage 2 at a 45-degree angle. You're going to slip that little silicone clip onto it. You're going to slice your scion wood at a 45-degree angle. And the reason why I like clear clips like this is, if they have a little airspace between the two of them, they can never grow together, right? They have to be touching. So you kind of push it in there until you can see that it's touching. That's it. The grafting part is simple. You know, anybody who can just make a little cut like this can graft a tomato. That's not the hard part. The hard part is selecting the proper rootstock and then healing it, right? Because you just cut the entire tomato off. And now you're asking something that has no roots left to it, kind of like cutting your head off and asking your body to just keep on, you know, putting it back together. You're asking it to stay alive. Now that part's the tough part, right? So that's where we go to the healing chamber, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So usually, when we're going back to this stage right here, see how thin those little plants are? They're tiny. We're usually going to start our seed a couple of weeks ahead of time, okay? 2 weeks ahead of time maybe. And you have to really line up, like when y'all come, and I'm going to let all y'all graft tonight. If you want to graft, and if you want to take your grafted plant home, that's fine by me. But I have eggplant tomatoes you can graft onto each other's, but eggplant grows really slow, so you kind of have to play around with your seeds, okay? You have to see how long does it take to get to that 1 to 2 millimeter diameter, and how long does your scion wood, because you can't, your diameter of your top and your bottom has to be the same. Does that make sense? When they slide together, they can line back up. All right? If, oh no, you went on vacation, you had a cruise planned, and you had all your expensive rootstock seed and all this going on at your house, and it got too big, you can use some of the traditional methods of grafting that we use in fruit tree production. Y'all know most fruit trees are grafted, right? So you can use the whip and tongue, and if y'all are interested in that, I'll explain how to do that to you. Or some people, if their tomato plants get too big, they'll use the cleft graft. Well, the cleft graft, you take your scion wood and you cut a 45-degree angle so it looks like a sharp pencil, right, on the scion wood. Usually in fruit tree production, you would do the same thing. You would cut a V into your rootstock because it's a woody plant. But a tomato is a herbaceous plant. It's really soft and bendy, right? So you don't cut the V. You just slice down into it and you push that pencil-looking part into it. Does that make sense to you guys? Right here, you're just going to take your razor blade and just cut straight down and then put it in. And you can wrap it with parafilm or, you know, some kind of bandage material, whatever you have. The reason why it's better to do it when they're smaller, they heal faster, they do better, and those little clips, they just push off the plant. As the plant's growing, you don't have to worry about constricting the growth. But if you choose to use other bandage type material or tapes, right, then you have to go and unravel all that, because otherwise you'll constrict the growth of the top part of the plant. It isn't just used for tomatoes. People graft cucumbers as well. They graft watermelon, they graft squash. We have tons of viruses. We have tons of all kinds of things that happen in cucurbits. And so you can do the tongue approach graft, which we've done this one with tomatoes too, but it doesn't work very successfully, at least in my encounter, where you would grow your rootstock in one cell and your scionwood in the other cell. And you basically slit into both and you just push them together. And you let them heal without cutting the rootstock off or the top off or the scionwood bottom off until they've completely healed, and then you cut the two off and they become one plant. That's pretty tricky. I'm not a fan of that one. When we're grafting cucurbits, there's this method, which is a little bit easier. You take your scionwood and you just pluck the top portion out, right? Your cotyledons and hopefully maybe even your first true leaf. And you drill a hole into your rootstock and you just slip it in there. Y'all know when you're looking into a cucumber plant, a squash, a watermelon, a cantaloupe, what else is related? Think about Halloween. What's decorating that table over there? Pumpkins, loofahs. Somebody else said it starts with a G. Gourds, all those are related, right? If you accidentally were to snap that plant off, how does it look on the inside? Hollow, right? So this one's a little bit easier. You kind of just drill a little bit more into that hollow part and you just slip that top in. You don't need clips or anything, and they heal together, okay? So you can do that, the whole insertation graft. Or the one that I think most people use is the one cotyledon graft, where you literally on your scionwood, you cut off a cotyledon, your rootstock, you cut off a cotyledon, those 45-degree angles, and you just pinch them back together again, okay? So again, the grafting part's not the hard part. This is the hard part, the healing chamber, okay? Now this is a commercial healing chamber. This is the one we have at LSU. And you can see here it is covered on the left, uncovered on the right. It's just a bench in the greenhouse, all right? And we've built kind of like a roof over it, just like a square box out of PVC pipe generally, okay? And then you drape greenhouse plastic over that. And then you put your grafted plants in there, and we have misters, little irrigation heads that come on every 15 seconds and keep that humidity between like 80 and 95% humidity, okay? Has to stay really humid, and it has to stay between like 70 and 80, 85 degrees for this whole process to take, so it has to be very controlled. We put on the shade cloth next and then a tarp, okay? So what we do is the first 2 days, the plants at the top, they're wilting. They just look like they're dead, like you screwed up majorly, okay, for basically the first 48 hours. But you keep them in the dark, in the pitch black. Then we take that tarp off after about 48 hours. And slowly we peel back layers of shade cloth, slowly allowing sunlight in. Why are we taking the sunlight away when we first cut them off and put them back together? Do you want the plants to grow? No, right? We don't care about photosynthesis or anything because we don't want them to do anything but heal, right? If we have sunlight in there, they're going to start, that bottom part's going to start trying to grow fast, and this is just going to wilt and die, okay? So slowly you just keep removing your shade cloth and your tarp. Eventually it's in the full light again. You keep them in there for about another week, and then you move them into the greenhouse, okay? Now, if you don't have all that kind of fancy stuff, you can still graft. This is a humidity chamber we built for a student science fair project. And y'all, we have probably 15 of these at LSU, and I think I like these better than the big fancy one that we have in the greenhouse because we can really control this. So we built this out of 1-inch PVC pipe. It's not glued together. You can take the whole thing apart, okay? Just for storage purposes, it's easier if you can take it apart and put it back together again. But we built it this small because, look, it fits one of my flats. Just perfect, right? You don't need 15 feet of headspace. That's just more area that you're going to have to keep humidified and worry about. As long as your plants aren't touching the top of it, you're fine. 6 inches above, 8 inches above the top of your flat is just fine. But most of us don't have access to greenhouse plastic, right? Or layers and layers of shade cloth. We probably have a tarp in the shed, but we all have trash bags, right? So all you do is you simply take a trash bag and you just put it over, and voila, now we have our greenhouse, right? Or our completely humidity-controlled cloth, okay? And then after I do that one, I take my dark trash bag, my black one, and I put it over, okay? And so then I'm going to do that the same way because I want them both opening to the same side. Oops. need an assistant, like a Vanna White here. Okay, and then you get your trusty water bottle, which could be anything, just an old Windex bottle, clean it out real good. And you just squirt inside this humidity chamber all over until it's dripping, okay? You want it kind of the roof dripping. You just want to get that humidity really high in there, okay? And then after your plants are grafted, you slip the whole thing in there, keep it closed up, put it in a room in your house, because remember, how light does it need to be those first 2 days? Dark. So it doesn't matter. It could be in a closet for all I care. But you need to open it up twice a day, all right? Why do you need to open it up twice a day? Mold, okay. What else? Air exchange, right? Plants are taking in carbon dioxide, letting out oxygen. So you got to kind of just open it up a little, let some air exchange happen, and remist twice a day. This is seriously, the best humidity chambers ever, okay? And I think that was probably 1 or 2 pieces of PVC 10 foot long. You know that we just cut in a couple of elbows. It's super, super simple. So then once you get it into the full light stage, you would just put it outside if you have a little makeshift greenhouse or, wherever you keep your other seedlings growing. So that's all you need for your humidity chamber. About 7 days, you're going to take it out. And here's, kind of showing you our not fancy ones. Where do you get these supplies, though? You're like, okay, well, this sounds fun. Maybe I'll do this, but where do I, unless you kind of pocketed some of these as you were being passed around, where are you going to get it? Hydro Gardens, Harris Seed. Have y'all heard of Johnny's before? That's pretty. Johnny's Select Seeds, Northeastern Seeds, all those places. Not only do they sell you plants, but they'll sell you pots, they'll sell you grafting supplies. Of course, your razor blades, you can get that at any old hardware store, right? But your clips, that's the one specialty item you need. Rootstock seed. We say, well, Kiki, this sounds interesting and cool, but where am I going to find your eggplant MM152 or this Maxifort you mentioned, or I'm going to go to that vegetablegrafting.org. Same thing, Harris, Johnny's, Paramount, Seeger Seed, all those seed companies you think of that sell you good vegetable seed or vegetables, they sell you all the rootstocks that you need too. So you just have to look it up, for your disease and then find it there. Now, here's the kicker. These rootstocks are expensive. I wouldn't be surprised if you were paying anywhere between 25 and 35 cents a seed for them, okay? So, buyer beware, I'm just letting you know, it's kind of expensive. But we have people whose livelihoods are depending on this process now. What if you say, well, I'm a market gardener, and I do a little truck patch, and I don't want to go through all that. That seems too much. Can I buy the plants already grafted? Of course you can. This one shown here in the picture, that's a grafted watermelon. That's from Trihistal. Trihistal is located in North Carolina. They are an amazing facility. If you guys ever visit Asheville, North Carolina, you have to go see Trihistal. They graft for all commercial growers there. They'll send you 10,000 plants if you want 10,000. They'll send you an 18-wheeler load full of grafted plants if you want them. I mean, big, huge. You can buy 100 acres of grafted watermelons from them if you want, okay? But they even go, I like the little stake they use, with their clips. They go to the extreme there. Growers are paying anywhere between 50 cents to $1.50 a piece, depending on what rootstock they wanted, okay, from those. But then again, if you're a home gardener, like most of us, Plug Connection, Redivine, Johnny Seeds, you can buy some fun little grafted plants in there. But it's just interesting. It's just really, really neat. And they're 100% healed over and great when you get them and ready to go to the fields. So, tips though, okay? Because not everything is just easy like a cookbook. We can't just follow certain instructions and things work out in life. These are living plants. You got to practice your seed sowing times. All right, so if you have a really vigorous tomato that's your rootstock and it grows really quickly, and then you planted your scionwood at the same time and it's not growing, the diameters won't be right. So usually we take about 5-10 seed and we kind of see how quickly it takes to grow. These eggplant that I'm holding up right here, and these tomatoes, these were planted almost a week and a half before these, and you can see how these are already a lot thicker. So I should have practiced this a little more. We're going to have to be careful when we're slicing and dicing tonight on these, okay? So Certain rootstocks grow really slowly, like eggplant. Some grow really fast. You have to know what you have, and you have to practice with that. Matching your diameters. High humidity, moderate temperatures, making sure that everything works ahead of time. If you just have a cheap little chamber like me, you don't have to make sure that works ahead of time. You're going to make sure it works. But if you have one of those fancy ones, don't graft all your plants and then go turn on the misters and find out they're all clogged with algae. That's a problem. So you got to think of things ahead of time. And you want to keep that environment as sterile as possible, okay? You don't want to be misting this and then coming over here and misting your ferns and they got a little disease or spores or whatever and get this stuff all cross-contaminated. Try to keep it as clean as possible. At LSU, we used to have tons of grafting experience. Now there's only 2 of us left in that. And one of them's my grad student now, so I'm very excited. She was a young lady in high school, and I helped her with her science fair project, and then I didn't hear from her for a while, and then she graduated LSU, and she said, I want to come back as a grad student. So now here she is working with us again. So I'm very proud of that. So take care of those kids doing their science fair projects. Lots of grad students that have come through LSU and left, and done this. So, and I'm sure here in Texas, do you know of any grafting experts, Dr. Creature?
A couple of Texas A&M.
Couple of Texas. You're not a grafting expert? You're a fruit tree grafting expert.
I've grafted a few vegetables.
Okay, all right, so there's your expert. So when things kind of go wrong, just bring it to the next series, workshop, and say, what happened here?
I'll blame Keith.
Yeah, and you'll answer that right there. We do have 2 things that might help you out a lot after this talk. So you get real excited, you want to graft your vegetables. We did a little video. It's a 2-minute YouTube video, and it shows you exactly how to graft, how plants should go in your healing chamber and all that kind of stuff. 2 minutes of your time, agcenter.com. You can see the whole shebang. It's a great little video. And if any of you all are really interested, and I didn't have enough for the audience tonight because LSU's budget is poor. And so we don't get to reprint a lot of our printed publications. Most of our stuff is online only now. So if any of you guys want the step-by-step instructions for how to graft, how to set up, how to build that humidity chamber, I have every little PVC piece and pipe and whatever you need and exact inches and that kind of thing in this publication. I'll start it half on this side and half on that side. So only if you really need the information, take it. Otherwise, y'all are going to have to go online because this was the one that we didn't have a lot of extra copies of. But there's lots of great information online for you guys to see how to do this. And if you're super into it, and this 50-minute talk wasn't enough for you, you can go to North Carolina next July and go to a whole vegetable grafting conference. I mean, this stuff is big. Lots of universities are getting into it. I think it's going to be, depending on new chemical, and y'all know they took away methyl bromide, which is what most of our vegetable farmers use to sterilize the soil, and that was just kind of like a kills-all. It didn't matter what you had, it killed it. But we can't use that anymore. So depending on what kind of new chemicals come up or don't come up, this grafting is going to really take off here in the United States. But with that, I wanted to save a lot of time because I find that mostly we learn by doing, not by listening to someone talk about it, okay? So I actually have 4 flats of eggplant, which is going to be our rootstock. And you can graft your tomato. We have Roma tomatoes onto the eggplant, or if you just want to graft the Roma right back onto itself or a Roma onto a different Roma, you're more than welcome to come up here and try. We have the razor blades, but y'all have to promise me you're going to be careful. In my plant propagation class, this was my 2nd year at LSU, the teacher said, everybody put on your gloves. We're grafting fruit trees. And he said, and every year I have one student that cuts themselves because you think you don't need the gloves. Well, I was impatient, and I didn't wait for the gloves, and I was the student that cut my finger that year and was bleeding all over the place. The only problem is I forgot to bring Band-Aids tonight. So you're in a big hurt if you cut yourself, so you've got to be very careful. Elise has some Band-Aids. What angle, I'm going to quiz you guys real quick. What angle do you need to cut your rootstock? Yes. And your scionwood, what angle? 45. So that's not like this or this. It's like this, right? Just a quick little thing. After you cut your rootstock and your scionwood, what are you going to do? You're going to put your clip on the rootstock, right? And then you're just going to slide that scionwood down in. Does it have to touch? Yes. Okay. Now, if you guys really want to take your grafted plant home, it's kind of the wrong time of year to be putting out grafted plants. So I'm teaching this to you so you can do this, when he knows, when do you put out your tomato crop? Middle March, she's saying right about here. Somebody else said April 1st, okay? Somewhere in between there. She's saying no to both of you. Late frost. 1st of April is a gamble, according to her. We got a nod of approval in the back. I was thinking here would be about April 1st, stress-free, So, okay. So if we're gonna graft our plants, right? We've got to back that up. When should you normally plant your seed? If you guys are like heirloom gurus and the local hardware store only has Sweet 100s, when do you put your seed in the ground for your 4 to 6 weeks? 4 weeks, you think? Okay. I always start mine about 8 weeks ahead of time. Maybe I'm stressing mine out, but I like 8 weeks. In the fall tomato crops, I like. Well, you want them that big. Okay. Well, I put them out like that big. That's the difference. All right, I would say, okay, so if we're going to normally start our seed, let's compromise. You say 4, I say 8, let's go 6. What's 6 weeks before, let's compromise again, April 1st. Middle of February. Okay, middle of February. So in how many days, I'm going to see how well y'all listen. How many days did I tell y'all that plant needed to sit in that healing chamber? 7 days. So let's back it up one more week. When are we starting a seed for our grafted plants? 1st week of February. And that's if one of those isn't really vigorous, right? Or if it's really slow growing, maybe even late January. Okay, so somewhere in that realm is when you want to start putting your seed out for this to happen for a good spring and summer tomato crop. So I think y'all are smart enough and ready to roll. Is anybody going to come graft? Yes, okay, you have people.
I have a question. I've heard some professionals say that when you use graft, you affect the flavor. Some people think self-rooted, unrooted tomatoes taste better than some of these grafted. Do you have any comments on that? Run a taste panel. Have you ever run
It's like, we had a lot of grafted plants in our field for Alejandra's project. She actually left, and I took care of all those plants in the field, but we didn't have anybody taste test. We should have her grafted versus her ungrafted. Flavor, flavor difference, I would guess or hypothesize that the difference would come in on a grafted plant, because I don't think flavors come, I lie, because we've done vegetable variety trials, tomato variety trials, where we've done them on campus, and then we've done them at 5 or 6 different farms throughout Louisiana, just to get, their thoughts and to see if what's happening on campus also happens in North, Central, and South Louisiana, all right? And we'll taste test those tomatoes in each field. And we always try to get them, at peak ripeness, because if you get it a day or two earlier or different, you could affect flavor that way too. But certain tomatoes have tasted way better in other fields than others. And I think there's something about the minerals in the soil, right, that flavor them. Because if you, anybody in here grow greenhouse tomatoes? Okay, so I'm not going to hurt anybody's feeling. When they don't have any soil at all, I find they don't taste as good. I think it's because of the mineral content of the soil, the terroir, the, like the champagne and grapes and that kind of thing. And I think that some soils might flavor tomatoes maybe a little better. But I think what happens with grafted plants is the ability of that rootstock to either suck in lots of minerals or not. How vigorous it is may or may not affect flavor. That's the only way I can see it affecting flavor.
Did you ever put in an inner stem upside down and try that?
Okay, excellent question. Sometimes if you really want X tomato on top, but it won't go onto the rootstock that you need, you can put a third piece in the center, all right? So you can graft the rootstock to a middle part to another part. If you take that middle part and you put it upside down, like Dr. Creech is talking about, it will not connect. They do that in fruit trees too. Y'all have heard of apical dominance, and trees wanting to grow up and all that kind of stuff. If you flip it upside down, it just won't take. So I feel like I'm going through my dissertation again or something, like he's gonna, what else do I need to know here?
This is where I ask you, what's your attitude about working in fast food for the rest of your life?
Yeah. No, thank you. No, thank you. Oh, sure. What's the future of vertical gardening? I think it's hot. I think it's hot not so much for edible plants. She's talking about vertical gardening, but for ornamentals. These living walls are becoming like artwork for people now. So if you see these new modern, and this is in Louisiana, y'all, where we're like 10 years behind everything on every level, okay? Fashion, design of buildings, everything, okay? But the newer, like more, like kind of like this building, you know, concrete floors, gray walls, real sterile, pretty, you know, though. It's you know, putting the ferns in there, the different, you know, variegated foliage. Edible plants usually need a lot of light, so I would see that those would need to go outside. What we're doing with vertical gardenings outside or with our schools, especially our schools in New Orleans, where the whole school doesn't even have a playground, or they have a playground on a roof because they have zero property around them, is the pallet gardens, you know, so we're growing gardens in pallets and just doing things like lettuce or chives or cabbage, not big tomatoes or peppers. So there is some merit to it. And I will plug, raise your hand in here if you've ever been to Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania. A couple of people, if y'all are plant people, and I'm assuming you are because you're in here and y'all might attest to this, it's one of the most beautiful gardens I've ever been to in my life. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of acres of cultivated gardens, and they have the largest living wall in the entire United States, a whole, like both sides and everything going like this, like snaking around, and it's gorgeous. So I think, you know, as a design standpoint, that's where it would go somewhere. No, hydroponics and vertical gardening, and that's getting somewhat popular. We've had a whole greenhouse industry go out of business in Louisiana because they tried to grow lettuce in tubes on top, middle, and bottom. The top tubes produced nice uniform heads, and they were marketable to the restaurants. The bottom ones were kind of leaning or stretching for the light because of the way they had it designed, and they weren't as marketable, so they could sell it like for chopped bag lettuce, but they couldn't get the high-end retail price that they wanted. So you gotta watch your design and how it's going. Who in here is a fan of National Geographic? Okay, National Geographic has some really great new videos that are coming out on their website, and I think it's down in Bangladesh. The people have, like, because of global warming, their villages are getting flooded more and more each year. So now they're growing all their edibles on these floating rafts. They have bamboo, water hyacinth, bamboo, water hyacinth, bamboo, water hyacinth. Okay, so they load it all up. They put manure on top, and they grow. And the ladies get in their dresses, you know, chest deep in the water, and they're picking all their vegetables. It's amazing. Okay. Well, now they're trellising up with these things, and now they're growing their different fish in between the gardens because they have to tether them all off so like big waves, they don't take them away. So people have been watching this, and now they have all these huge designs for these big hydroponic, vertical, edible gardens that can float on the ocean for, you know, someday in the future when we have no more land and that kind of stuff. So it's showing what, like grafting, showing what people did a long, long, long time ago and trying to make it a futuristic thing. And in that, if you watch that video, it's like a 15-minute video. It has all these, you know, like designs for these things that might be 4 and 5 stories high that could support a village of 10,000 people, you know, floating in the middle, like an oil rig, just out there in the ocean, you know? It's not true yet, but the Bangladesh people are living like this, and they're eating well and happy, and it's neat. It's really neat. Those videos were designed for kids. So they show a lot of children, but I found it fascinating as an adult to watch it. So, and they're called, National Geographic calls that series Adaptations of Change. What they're trying to show is how the world has changed over time because of humans. We've done things to it, but no one's blaming anybody for it. It's not, you know, anybody's fault one way or the other. What they're showing is how people have adapted to the changes in the environment on the earth. It's super cool. It's a really neat little video series.